Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, John.
Thanks for coming over.
No problem.
Okay, here's the stove. We just moved in about a month ago and it was here.
Right, I remember this stove. My store actually sold and installed this probably about 2 years ago.
Well, then you're just the right person to help me run it properly. The stove is cold and I have some firewood ready and the flashlight you asked me to have handy.
Right, that's great. Have you heated with wood before?
Yes, but it was a fairly new stove, but it didn't have a catalyst, and that's what I want your help with. I want to make sure I know how it works and how to run it properly.
I can help with that. Have you had much chance to run this stove yet?
I've had a few fires, but it doesn't work like my old stove, and I think I'm doing something wrong.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to read the owner's manual?
I have, but there's still some things I'm not clear on.
Okay, let me just show you the main parts and talk about what they do. The stove has two main controls. This knob is the air control. It adjusts the amount of air the fire gets. On the dial, L is low and H is high. When you set it to L, you get a longer burn at a lower heat level. When you set it to H, you get a shorter burn and a hotter stove. Does that make sense?
Sure. The air control on my old stove was in a different place, but it had the same effect.
Right. We'll talk more about how to use the air control once we get a fire going. The second control is this lever. It opens and closes the catalyst bypass damper inside the stove. When the lever faces you, the bypass is open. And when it's away from you, it's closed. It's important that you use the bypass correctly. It's good the stove's cold. There's a couple of things that I wanted to show you inside. Let's have a look. See that screen right there? That's the flame shield that prevents flame from reaching the catalytic combustor. See the combustor behind the shield?
Yes, I see it. Does direct flame damage the combustor?
It could if there were no shield and you ran the stove on high all the time. Now watch as I open and close the bypass. When it's open, all the smoke from the fire goes straight up the chimney, bypassing the combustor. When the bypass is closed, all the smoke passes through the combustor. The bypass must be either open for starting a fire or rekindling from charcoal, or closed for steady heating, never just partway closed.
So why does the smoke have to bypass the combustor?
There's a couple of reasons. I brought one with me to show you what it looks like. The first reason is that the combustor is fairly restrictive to gas flow. So if you open the loading door with the damper closed, you might get smoke rollout into your living room. And second, before the combustor reaches operating temperature and the catalyst becomes active, dense smoke going through it could coat or even plug those small passages.
Right, now I understand the need for the bypass.
While we're talking about the combustor, I want to show you an easy way to maintain it in good condition. After burning a lot of wood, bits of ash might collect on the combustor. When the stove is cold, lift out the flame shield. Then using the small brush attachment for your vacuum cleaner, vacuum back and forth across the combustor to remove the deposits. Put the flame shield back in place and you're done.
That's easy. How often will I have to vacuum it?
Not very often, maybe only once a year. But you can actually see these deposits, either when the stove is cold or when the combustor glows during a hot fire. So the idea is to have a look whenever you think about it, just to see if you can see the deposits. That's also a good time to check the door latch and gasket to be sure the door still seals well.
Vacuuming the combustor seems easy, but how do I check the door seal?
Well, that's easy too. Just open the door and close it on a piece of paper, like this. Test it all around, including the hinge side. If the paper slides out when the door is latched, adjust the door latch by loosening this nut and turning the bolt. If the paper still slides out on the hinge side, you should replace the door gasket. Got that?
Sure, I can do that. This is really helpful advice.
Let me give you the short version of how to run this stove. Here are the 6 steps to follow in getting a fire going in a catalytic stove. First, open the bypass. Second, open the combustion air control. Third, empty ashes if necessary. Fourth, build and light the fire. Fifth, as soon as the catalyst thermometer reads in the active zone, close the bypass. Sixth, run the stove on high for 25 to 30 minutes. Then adjust the air control for the desired heat output. Got that?
Yes, that sounds very simple.
And here are the 6 steps to follow when rekindling a fire from a live charcoal bed. First, open the bypass and the air control fully. Second, rake the charcoal towards the door. Third, Allow the remaining charcoal to heat up while you prepare the wood for the next load. That will reduce the time it takes to ignite the new load. Fourth, add as much wood as is needed for the conditions. Fifth, as soon as the thermometer reads in the active zone, close the bypass. And sixth, after running the stove on high for 25 to 30 minutes, adjust the air control for the desired heat output.
Why do I need to run the stove on high for 25 minutes?
A few reasons. The high heat warms up the new load, drives the moisture from the surface of the wood. It heats the stove parts and chimney in preparation for a stable burn, and it clears most of the stains from the door glass.
Got it.
Okay, let's light a fire and see what happens. We'll just use a few pieces of this fire starter to save time.
I don't have to use those, do I?
No, you can also use newspaper and finely split dry kindling to start the fire. If you use newspaper, avoid the shiny colored stuff like advertising flyers or magazines. Regular newsprint is okay, even with some color on it. Okay, we've got a pretty good load in there now. The firebox is full, the air control is set to high, and the bypass damper is open. Here we go. I'll leave the door closed but not latched for a few minutes while the fire catches. We can just sit back down as the fire builds and the stove warms up.
So Vanessa, what makes this catalytic stove different from my old stove?
Well, your old stove didn't use a catalyst, but instead used firebox insulation, a baffle that forms the ceiling of the firebox, and a secondary air supply distributed around the top of the firebox. Those features are used to reduce smoke emissions.
Yes, I remember seeing all that stuff in my last stove.
This stove has some of those features, like firebox insulation, but the big difference is that it runs the exhaust through the catalyst to burn the smoke. The catalyst is a coating on this ceramic or stainless steel honeycomb that lowers the ignition temperature of the combustible gases flowing through it. It does this without the catalyst being used up in the process. It has roughly the same role as the catalytic converter in your car exhaust, and it produces heat in the process. The fire has a good start, it's heated the chimney and produced good draft. So John, why don't you latch that door?
Okay. I've heard that catalysts wear out and have to be replaced.
That's true, but they can last a long time.
So how long can I expect this one to last?
I can't be very specific because the life of the catalyst is affected by the fuel you burn, how you run the stove, and how much wood you burn each year. But I can tell you that the catalyst in this stove has a 10-year warranty.
Well, that's encouraging. So how will I know when the catalyst wears out?
Well, it won't happen suddenly. As it wears out, you might notice that you're using more wood or notice smoke coming from your chimney when the stove is operating normally with the bypass closed. If it is working right, you might see white steam, but you won't see any smoke. Also, the combustor thermometer on the top of the stove lets you know the catalyst is working correctly when the indicator stays in that active zone. And there are things that you shouldn't burn because they can damage the catalytic coating on the combustor. The clear advice for all people who heat with wood is never burn garbage. It causes toxic smoke emissions that pollute the air. But if burned in these stoves, garbage can damage the combustor very quickly. Burn only seasoned, natural firewood.
Okay, I promise.
I think it may be time to close the bypass. Yes, it is. See, the catalyst thermometer is just into the active zone. That means the combustor is hot enough to be active and burn off the smoke. I'll just close it so that the smoke flows through the combustor instead of straight up the chimney. Of course, when you're rekindling a fire from the charcoal left over from a previous fire, it takes much less time to warm things up, so you can close the bypass sooner. We'll just let it run for 25 minutes or so to heat things up, then we'll turn down the air for a steady burn.
That's the part I wasn't sure about. After watching how you did it, I think I let the stove run way too long before closing.